Greetings. Today we delve into one of the most extraordinary stories of resilience and survival in aviation history. An aircraft battered and nearly torn apart in the chaos of war, yet defying every expectation to stay airborne. This is the tale of the All-American 3. Can a damaged plane, with its tail section almost severed, remain flying against all aerodynamic rules? How did a legendary pilot, once a star athlete, manage to keep this battered beast in the sky after a catastrophic collision? What secrets does the photograph of that torn aircraft hold? One that would become an icon of human endurance. And what does this incredible incident reveal about the limits of engineering and the unbreakable human spirit in the face of impossible odds? All these questions swirl around a single moment in time where destruction met determination and the impossible became reality. Because what you are about to discover is a story that challenges everything we think we know about flight, resilience, and the will to survive. Stay tuned, because right now, the most astonishing chapter begins. An epic tale of courage that will leave you questioning the very limits of human achievement. Resilience of someone who had faced countless challenges and emerged victorious each time. It was a rare morning where the desert seemed undisturbed by the chaos of war, presenting a rare window of calm that contrasted sharply with the fierce skies above. The sun had just begun to crest the horizon, casting a pale golden hue over the vast expanse of the Tunisian desert, a stark reminder of the harsh and unforgiving environment where these men risked their lives every day. Lieutenant Harry C. Newsell meticulously charted their flight path back to base, his pencil gliding over the carefully drawn lines on the navigation map. As he made calculations, he occasionally glanced through the condensation gathering on his oxygen mask, the blurred numbers a testament to the tense concentration required in such tense moments. They were just 17 minutes away from reaching a zone where German fighters no longer posed a threat, a brief interval of supposed safety amid the chaos of war. The reconnaissance reports indicated that enemy aircraft, spaced at about 1,200 feet above them, were rapidly closing in, streaking through the air at a frightening pace. Suddenly, the tense silence was shattered by the crackling voice of the tail gunner on the intercom. His warning, sharp and urgent, warned of incoming fighters hurtling through the air at breakneck speed. Lieutenant Newsell barely had time to lift his eyes from the map before a haunting sound reached his ears, a sound that would stay with him for the rest of his life, etched into the very fabric of his memory. It was not the expected thunder of machine guns or the explosive burst of bombs. Rather, it was a distinct and unsettling swoosh, accompanied by an enormous jolt and a forceful thud that reverberated through the plexiglass nose cone of the Boeing B-7F, the aircraft designated as All-American 3. In that split second, Newsell watched in disbelief as fragments from a German Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter, moments before sleek and lethal, tumbled past one wing of their bomber, a chaotic cascade of shattered metal and splintered fuselage. Pieces of the enemy aircraft, once a symbol of German air power, floated lazily away in the thin, dry desert air, their iron crosses still visible on their wings, spiraling downward toward the barren sands 5 miles below. Miraculously, this was no ordinary aerial confrontation. The enemy fighter had not exploded into fire or fallen in a cloud of smoke. It had collided with their bomber, physically striking it with devastating impact. Yet somehow, against all odds, the aircraft remained airborne. What none of the 10 crew members knew at that moment was that their aircraft had just become the focal point of one of the most extensively documented incidents in aviation history. Their B-7F was now flying with its tail section nearly severed, held together only by a fragile arrangement of metal spars and delicate strips of aluminum skin. The photograph of their damaged aircraft, taken within the following hour, would become one of the most iconic images of World War II. It would be scrutinized by engineers and aviation historians for decades, a testament to human resilience and engineering ingenuity in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The physics defied everything known about aerodynamics. Standard principles dictated that such a severely damaged aircraft, with its tail almost entirely torn away, should have been plunging uncontrollably toward the sands of the Sahara as a heap of twisted metal and shattered aluminum. Yet against all expectation, First Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg Jr., a man of remarkable steadiness who carried the quiet confidence of a legendary college athlete, managed to keep the battered ship in the sky. Bragg's grip on the control yoke was firm, his determined focus unwavering as he maintained control over the roughly 65,000 pounds of damaged aircraft. His resolve was reminiscent of his past victories on the football field at Duke University during the fall of 1938, where he had demonstrated unyielding perseverance and leadership. This extraordinary moment marked the beginning of the most improbable survival story in the entire history of aerial combat. It was a striking demonstration of both American engineering excellence and the unbreakable human spirit. The seemingly miraculous endurance of All-American 3 would cause the German Luftwaffe to reassess their assumptions about the might of the B-17 Flying Fortress. The aircraft's engines, which had momentarily faltered, roared back to life in the pre-dawn hours at Biskra Airfield in Algeria. Their radial engines, the mighty Wright Cyclones, sent vibrations rippling through the desert sand, a telling sign of the raw power beneath the battered fuselage. This particular day, February 1st, arrived with striking clarity and precision. The usual desert storms and swirling sands had temporarily retreated, leaving behind clear skies, minimal wind, and visibility that seemed endless. Perfect for the bombing missions they were about to undertake. As the operations officer briefed the crew at 4 in the morning, Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg, affectionately known as Son Bragg among his peers, methodically checked the control surfaces. Certainly. Here is the deeply reworked and expanded version of the original text, crafted to be more fluid, detailed, and engaging, while preserving all key information and facts. Confidence radiated from him, a confidence born out of proven success across multiple domains. His reputation was well established, and it extended beyond the confines of his current endeavors. Back in Savannah, where he had first made a name for himself, newspapers continued to celebrate his legendary achievements. One of the most talked about stories was his remarkable performance with Duke's iconic 1938 Iron Dukes, a team that had etched its name into college football history. That team had been undefeated throughout the regular season and had yet to allow a single point against them. They had become known as the team that could not be beaten, an unassailable force on the gridiron. The qualities that had contributed to their invincibility, mental toughness, unwavering resilience, and an unshakable refusal to accept defeat, had served him well long before his military days. These traits seemed woven into his character, guiding him from a celebrated football career to the skies above Europe. Since exchanging his football cleats for flight boots, he had demonstrated that same relentless perseverance and indomitable spirit in an entirely different arena. The aircraft known by its serial number, 412,406, a Boeing B-17F model, had become his trusted wingman since August of 1942. It was more than just a machine. It was an extension of his resolve, an aircraft he knew intimately, inside and out. He could detect every rivet, understand each peculiar sound, and listen to her as if she were alive, her subtle hums and creaks revealing her condition and readiness. Built at Boeing's sprawling plant in Seattle, she had journeyed across the Atlantic Ocean as part of Operation Bolero, a colossal effort to reinforce Allied forces in Europe by air. Her journey was a testament to the massive logistical and engineering efforts that supported the war effort from the United States, a nation committed to defeating tyranny on multiple fronts. The crew had painted her name boldly across her nose, a symbol of hope and resilience. She bore the proud designation of All-American 3, a sequel to her storied predecessors, each of whom had borne the same name, each one falling victim to the brutal realities of war. Yet despite their tragic fates, this aircraft ran as smoothly as silk, a testament to the meticulous care of her mechanics and the resilience of her design. On this particular morning, Lieutenant Technical Sergeant Joe C. James sat at his station at the flight engineers panel, his mind fully focused on the task at hand. James was not just a mechanic. He possessed a remarkable mechanical intuition that distinguished the best engineers from their good counterparts. When he declared the aircraft ready, it was as if a silent pact had been made. She was prepared to carry her crew into the unknown. The crew gathered that dawn, a reflection of the diverse tapestry that characterized the American war effort. Men from vastly different backgrounds, all united by a common purpose and rigorous training, now stood together preparing for what might be their most critical mission. The co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Godfrey Engel, Jr., knew the significance of their task. Hailing from a wealthy banking family in Connecticut, Engel brought a calm steadiness to the cockpit, an anchor amid the chaos. The navigator, Harry C. Nussel, had traded the comforts of his studies at the University of Minnesota for the rigors of military aviation, demonstrating the daring and dedication that marked so many of his generation. The bombardier, Ralph Burbridge, was a young man of 23, already a seasoned combat veteran, having earned his wings before the attack on Pearl Harbor enshrouded the nation in war. His experience was unmatched among the crew, making him one of their most valuable assets on the flight. Beyond the officers, the enlisted men brought their own vital expertise to the team. The radio operator, Staff Sergeant Paul A. Galloway, had mastered the complex and temperamental liaison radios that linked bomber formations, ensuring their communication remained clear amidst the chaos. The waist gunners, Staff Sergeant Michael Zuck and Sergeant Elton Condor, this last a last-minute replacement from the 341st Squadron due to an unforeseen crew illness, carefully checked and rechecked their .50 caliber Browning machine guns, vital for defending the bomber against enemy fighters. Then there was Staff Sergeant Sam T. Serapoulos, soon to earn the nickname Lonesome Sam due to the haunting reasons that would shortly emerge, who settled into his isolated position with the stoicism of a man who recognized his role as the bomber's most vulnerable defender. As part of the elite 77th Bombardment Group, he understood the inherent danger of his station, accepting the risk with a resigned but unwavering resolve. The 77th had been the first American heavy bomber unit to see combat, and the strategic importance of these ports in North Africa could not be overstated, as they effectively extended Axis resistance along the southern flank of the continent. Each successful bombing run was a significant step forward for the Allies, bringing them ever closer to breaking through the Axis defenses and opening the pathway into southern Europe. The formation of aircraft in the sky over the Mediterranean was a spectacle of practiced precision, resembling a meticulously choreographed aerial ballet that had been perfected through countless rehearsals. Among the 12 B-17 flying fortresses belonging to the 414th Bombardment Squadron, one aircraft, dubbed All-American 3, took its designated place on the right wing of the lead bomber, which was known as Flaming and commanded by Major Robert Coulter, the squadron's operations officer. The entire formation was shrouded by a sense of unease and anticipation because the fighter escort, composed of sleek P-38 Lightnings intended to weave protective patterns around them, was inexplicably grounded due to mechanical failures, leaving the bombers vulnerable. This absence of fighter support cast a long shadow over the formidable formation and heightened the risks faced during the operation. In the cold, high-altitude environment, at around 20,000 feet, temperatures plummeted to a chilling -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice steadily condensed and adhered to the windows, impairing visibility, while the breath of the crew quickly froze within their oxygen masks, necessitating constant manual removal of ice crystals so that airflow would remain unobstructed. The electrically heated flight suits, an impressive marvel of American technological ingenuity designed to combat such Arctic conditions, labored desperately against the relentless cold. Yet many men still suffered from frostbite of a severity that could rival their battle wounds, difficult scars of survival in the frozen sky. As the target history below came into view, Bombardier Ralph Burbridge announced crisply over the intercom that Tunis had emerged through the scattered clouds. The port was a hive of activity, ships bustling with unloading operations, trains idling on sidings, trucks streaming steadily toward the front line, where the remnants of the Africa Corps were valiantly making their last stand against the combined forces of Montgomery's 8th Army and Patton's 2nd Corps. The precision required for the upcoming bomb run was absolute, demanding the aircraft maintain a perfect, straight and level flight for 3 minutes without even a hint of evasive maneuvering. During this critical window, Burbridge synchronized his Norden bomb sight, a highly guarded and secret device that the Americans meticulously removed from their aircraft after each mission to prevent its capture. This sophisticated instrument relied on a complex network of gyroscopes and mechanical calculations to determine the precise moment to release the bombs, ensuring maximum destructive impact. As the bombers maintained their steady course, the crew prepared for the moment of release. Suddenly, the warning came. Unnecessary flak coming up, someone reported, though it was evident to all that the skies were thick with danger. The black puffs of exploding anti-aircraft shells blossomed around the formation, each one representing hundreds of fragments of shrapnel aimed with lethal intent at the bomber's aluminum shells and crew. The formidable German 88mm anti-aircraft guns, initially engineered as anti-tank weapons, had proven to be particularly deadly against these high-flying bombers. Fused to explode at a set altitude, these shells created deadly zones of destruction, forcing the aircraft to fly through a deadly box of death. As Burbridge finally gave the command, "Bombs away," All-American 3 lurched upward, releasing her payload of roughly 4,000 pounds of high explosives. Below, chaos erupted in the port area as fires and smoke billowed from attacking bombs hitting warehouses, secondary explosions from stored ammunition, and ships listing dangerously in their moorings. It was arguably their best strike yet, one that could significantly hamper Axis supplies and reinforce the Allied push on North Africa. However, the brief moment of triumph was quickly overshadowed by the necessity to turn westward and continue their mission, as the formation prepared for the next phase of their assault. As the American bomber lumbered through the sky, the tense silence was shattered by the sudden appearance of two enemy fighters, seemingly emerging out of nowhere. These aerial assailants, identified as Messerschmitt Bf-109G4 models, soared approximately 2,000 feet above the bomber's fuselage, resembling a formation of sleek, menacing shadows against the bright sunlit sky. The alarm was sounded almost simultaneously by several crew members manning the gun positions, alerting the entire crew that enemy aircraft were closing in rapidly. Without hesitation, the two German fighters dove from their high-altitude vantage point, eager to initiate their attack. These fighters, expertly piloted, knew from harsh experience that the B-17's defensive firepower was most vulnerable from the front. The nose-mounted guns, designed primarily for forward fire, could not depress enough to engage enemies approaching from below or directly ahead, while the turret on top of the bomber lacked the speed to track fast-moving targets approaching from above at a high angle. One of the attacking aircraft, flown by a seasoned pilot named Oerleut Julius Meimberg of the 11th Staffel of Jagdgeschwader II, who was temporarily assigned to the Jagdgeschwader 53 unit, was recognized as an ace of spades, a symbol of veteran skill. Meimberg's fighter opened fire at approximately 500 yards, unleashing a stream of destructive projectiles. His 20mm cannons and 13mm machine guns sparkled in the sunlight as they released a deadly barrage, aiming directly at the flock of bombers. The lead bomber surrendered to the relentless fusillade, shuddering violently as fragments of aluminum and metal peeled away in all directions, much like confetti scattered during a celebration. The fierce attack continued as a second enemy aircraft, flown by Feldwebel Erich Patzia of the 6th Staffel of JG-53, swooped in on the remaining American aircraft, now fighting to defend themselves from multiple enemies. Patzia was relatively inexperienced compared to Meimberg, but had already amassed a formidable record, with 16 confirmed victories. His skill and precision earned him the prestigious Ehrenpokal der Luftwaffe, a goblet-shaped award given to pilots who demonstrated exceptional success in aerial combat. Patzia had an undeniable knack for targeting critical points. He knew exactly where to aim to inflict maximum damage, specifically targeting the engines to shut down the aircraft, the cockpit to eliminate the pilots, and the wing routes where vital fuel tanks were located. Yet something unexpectedly went wrong during this deadly attack. At roughly 300 yards, Patzia initiated his escape maneuver, a half-roll designed to take his fighter underneath the target bomber, out of the increasing defensive fire. This was a maneuver he had performed countless times before, executing it with practiced confidence. But this time, something was different. Whether it was overconfidence, fixation on the target, mechanical malfunction, or perhaps an even graver circumstance, such as the pilot being already dead, the maneuver was begun too late, or maybe not at all. The historical record later suggests that Patsia was, in fact, already beyond help. As Ralph Burbridge, a crew member, would later recall, "I had him in my sights. That guy was coming straight at us, and I could see his face through the windscreen." Not long after, the top turret opened fire, adding to the chaos. James, manning the twin 50 caliber machine guns from the top turret, immediately struck the attacking fighter. The German aircraft lurched unexpectedly, as if it had been yanked violently with a string, initiating a sluggish rightward roll. Technical Sergeant Joe James's burst of fire ripped into the cockpit of the Bf-109, at least one, possibly more rounds hitting its mark. The immediate consequence was devastating. Whether Paxia had been killed outright or incapacitated by the gunfire, the result was the same. The fighter was suddenly uncontrollable. The weight and velocity of the 2,000-pound aircraft, hurtling at over 350 miles per hour, meant it could no longer be directed by its pilot or onboard controls. The uncontrolled fighter, battered and tumbling, veered into all three American bombers clustered in close formation. Almost instantaneously, in less than 2 seconds, the German fighter rammed into one of the bombers, slicing across its fuselage with the force of a sword. The left wing of the enemy aircraft gouged a deep diagonal gash across the bomber's body, severing it entirely from the vertical stabilizer to the left horizontal stabilizer, which was finally torn away completely. The impact was catastrophic and devastating for the bomber's crew, leaving destruction in its wake. In the days following the incident, Harry Newell, the bomber's navigator, wrote a vivid account of the chaos as he experienced it firsthand. His letter to his brother, penned within days of the attack, contained the most immediate and visceral description of what he saw. Newell recalled that the fighter hit their aircraft with the airstream was a battlefield of chaos and resilience, a moment where physics seemed to momentarily lose its grip on reality. At the heart of this chaos was an encounter that defied all logical expectation. The impact of a fierce fighter plane against a larger bomber, a collision that should have resulted in complete destruction. The German Bf-109 aircraft, flying at a blistering relative speed of nearly 400 miles per hour, appeared poised to cleave the B-17 in two, slicing through its structure with devastating certainty. Yet remarkably, fate intervened, or what many of the crew would later describe as divine grace, and the fighter's wing narrowly missed crashing into the main structural spars on the right side of the aircraft's fuselage. This split-second misalignment prevented total destruction, allowing the bomber to remain surprisingly intact amid the chaos. The tail section, housing Staff Sergeant Sam Cerilis, remained attached by what investigators would later describe as the absolute minimum of structural connection necessary for the aircraft to retain some measure of control. The German fighter, however, was not so fortunate. It disintegrated upon impact. Its wing, torn free, lodged partially into the fuselage of the battered bomber. The engine in the forward part of the aircraft's fuselage exploded into a blaze, creating an inferno of flame and wreckage that shot into the desert sky like a catastrophic firework. Meanwhile, the tail section, with its unmistakable yellow nose and distinct black crosses, became a spinning silhouette, a maple seed tumbling toward the arid landscape beneath. Within that flaming wreckage was Feldwebel Erich Patsia, born on the 7th of May in 1918 in Germany. Posthumously, he would be awarded the honorary title of his comrade, marking his untimely death on March 1st, 1943. Little did those remaining aboard the bomber realize that his passing had inadvertently woven one of aviation history's most extraordinary survival stories. Yet amidst the wreckage, the crew of the all-American third bomber had no opportunity to ponder the fate of their fallen adversary. Their immediate concern was far more pressing. They faced grave threat, problems so severe that, by all known laws of physics and aerodynamics, they should have been insurmountable. Pilot to crew, check in. Is everyone all right? Bragg's voice, transmitted through the aircraft's intercom system, was calm and steady, unflustered by the physical exertion required to wrestle control over an aircraft that was rapidly losing its natural stability. The strain was evident in the control cables, those critical lines connecting the pilot's commands to the tail surfaces, the elevators and rudder. that had been either severed or severely damaged in the collision. Without these vital controls, the plane was inherently unstable, inclined to pitch down uncontrollably into what pilots term a Sturin graveyard spiral, a deadly looping descent that often spelled disaster. One by one, the crew members responded, reporting their status. Miraculously, none had been injured by the collision itself. The crash had spared them from catastrophic wounds. But when it was time for the tail gunner to communicate, silence greeted the call. "Sam Sorrellis, you okay back there?" Bragg repeated attentively. Still, there was no response. The intercom line leading to the tail section had been cut, severed in the impact, leaving the crew to wonder about the fate of their comrade. Yet through a jagged hole in the fuselage, the waist gunners could discern movement, a small, fragile sign of life within the chaos. They saw that Sam Sorrellis, the tail gunner, was alive, though him being there was increasingly perilous. His position was isolated, and the tail itself was now a separate entity, swaying undirected in the air currents, like a kite caught in the unpredictable winds of a hurricane, a description one crew member vividly recalled. The circumstantial damage was staggering in its scope. The left horizontal stabilizer, an essential surface that helps maintain aircraft stability, was completely ripped away, lost when the BF-109's wing gouged into the fuselage. The elevator, which controls the aircraft's pitch, had vanished along with the stabilizer. The vertical stabilizer, the large upright fin that helps with directional control, bore a massive gash at its base, a brutal wound inflicted during the collision. From the tail gunner's position forward to just behind the waist gun windows, the fuselage was torn open like a tin can, crushed in the harsh grip of an industrial can opener. Control cables dangled loose in the slipstream, flapping and whipping with each gust, while hydraulic fluid leaked, seeping from severed lines and creating a slick patch of danger amid the wreckage. Despite these fears, Lieutenant Charles Cliff Cutforth, who served as the navigator aboard a nearby B-17 aircraft equipped with forward guns, managed to maneuver close enough for a photograph, an image that would later become a poignant reminder of the crew's extraordinary ordeal. The scene captured one of history's most renowned aerial images, a stark testament to the chaos and destruction wrought during the war. In this photograph, the tail section of the aircraft known as All-American No. 3 is unmistakably misaligned, clearly offset from its normal position. It appears caned at an alarming angle that strongly hints at an imminent catastrophic failure of critical structural components. One can vividly observe a jagged slash running diagonally across the fuselage, a raw wound carved into the aircraft's body, along with the conspicuous absence of the stabilizer that would normally contribute to steady flight. Strangely, despite the extensive damage, the plane appears to be maintaining a level attitude, an observation that defies the fundamental principles of aerodynamics and physics, leaving anyone who comprehends the science puzzled and awestruck. It almost seems as though some unseen force or miracle has temporarily defied the laws of nature. At that moment, the entire aft section of the aircraft seemed on the verge of detachment, threatening to rip away entirely at any second. Inside the cockpit, co-pilot Godfrey Engel Jr., trembling yet focused, worked desperately alongside Lieutenant Bragg, trying every conceivable combination of control inputs that could possibly stabilize their dying aircraft and keep it airborne a little longer. With the usual control surfaces, such as the elevators, rudder, and ailerons, rendered ineffective or dangerously compromised, the crew had to draw on their ingenuity to find an alternative solution. The aircraft's autopilot system, connected to the Norden bomb site, an elaborate device used for aiming bombs, was powered by electrical servos rather than the usual mechanical cables, which gave a faint hope of providing some measure of stability. By partially engaging this system, they hoped to counteract the aircraft's uncontrollable movements and maintain whatever semblance of control they could muster. One of the few remaining tools at their disposal was the differential engine power technique. By meticulously adjusting the throttle settings, increasing the power to the engines on one side relative to the other, specifically running the left engines at a slightly higher throttle than the right, they aimed to counteract the aircraft's yaw tendencies. Every control input, however, had to be performed with extreme caution. Too much force could cause further structural stress, or worse, snap the already fragile tail section from the fuselage entirely. It was a delicate dance, a painstaking effort to keep the aircraft's integrity intact amidst chaos. Meanwhile, on the radio, the voice of Major Coulter crackled through the static, a voice strained with concern, but still holding authority. His message was urgent. All American, this is Major Coulter. Your aircraft is severely damaged and on the brink of failure. Can you make it home? The request carried a weight of desperation and hope intertwined, a plea for salvation amid the peril. Lieutenant Bragg glanced at the fuel gauges, measuring their remaining reserves with a sober eye. The reports showed no significant fuel leaks, and the tank's readings indicated that they still possessed enough fuel to reach their intended base. The engines continued to hum steadily, with temperature and pressure levels remaining within normal ranges, and the electrical system stubbornly functioning despite the physical chaos surrounding them. In many ways, all essential systems seemed to be holding, if only marginally, altogether. Yet the most conspicuous fact remained. A substantial portion of the aircraft's structure had been ripped away, a minor detail compared to the overall catastrophe. Certainly, it was a crippling injury, but perhaps survivable with enough luck and skill. Inside the fractured tail section, Staff Sergeant Sam T. Saris faced an almost impossible decision, one that would test the very limits of his courage and resolve. The wreckage was shifting independently, sometimes moving several feet away from the main fuselage, which created a treacherous environment. It was clear that staying where he was posed deadly risks, as the tail's disjointed movements could cause further structural failure at any moment, leading to complete detachment. Alternatively, he could attempt to crawl forward through the jagged, torn fuselage, navigating a perilous path toward what little safety he might find in the sturdier, more intact main body of the aircraft. The tail was in a state of severe disarray, often out of alignment with the rest of the plane, and each movement he made put him under enormous stress. Every slight jolt or turbulence risked tearing the remaining connections apart, potentially sending him plummeting into the void 5 miles below. Yet Saris made his choice, driven by instinct, duty, and a fierce will to survive. He secured his chest parachute, gathered his equipment, and in a moment that would become legend, grabbed a borrowed jacket that belonged to Lieutenant Bragg, an act symbolic of both camaraderie and desperation. With this, he embarked on what would prove to be the most perilous 30 feet he had ever traveled. The interior scene within the fuselage was apocalyptic. Daylight streamed through tears in the aluminum skin, casting jagged shadows across the wreck. Later, the crew would look back on these moments with a mix of admiration and somber reflection. Throughout the tense ordeal, the most composed among them maintained their composure. The pilot moved with deliberate calmness, carefully dragging his equipment behind him as he made his way toward the forward section of the aircraft, his steps steady despite the chaos around him. When he finally reached the others, the first action he took was to pass the lieutenant's jacket over to me, an act performed with quiet urgency. "Make sure the skipper gets this back," he said without a trace of panic in his voice. "He might need it after we land." The whole journey, which an ordinary person might expect to last mere seconds, had stretched to nearly 10 long minutes. Yet despite the delay, Sam Saris had managed to reach us alive. Now all 10 crew members had gathered in the front section of the bomber, preparing for the possible need to eject from the stricken aircraft. Meanwhile, the formation of bombers faced a decision that weighed heavily on all involved, a decision that could change everything in an instant. Official protocol dictated that any aircraft severely damaged and no longer able to maintain formation speed should be left behind, as continuing to carry it could jeopardize the safety of the remaining planes. Allowing a crippled aircraft to lag could force the entire squadron to slow down, exposing them to increased danger from enemy fighters and increasing the likelihood of being targeted. However, the crew of the 414th Squadron refused to abandon their comrades, especially not the American Valor, the name given to their lead bomber. Instead, the formation moved to encircle the wounded aircraft, forming a tight defensive cordon that used their combined firepower to shield the stricken bomber from enemy fighters. This collective battlefield strategy embodied loyalty and brotherhood, men who had trained together in North African bases amid the harshest conditions, who had mourned fallen friends together, and who valued their camaraderie above strict adherence to procedure. The risk involved was significant. Flying slower to stay close meant exposing themselves to enemy fighters longer than necessary and increasing their vulnerability. Yet these men prioritized each other's lives, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty that transcended simple rules of engagement. All eyes communicated their resolve as the formation's commander transmitted through radio, voice steady but resolute. "This is Red Leader," he announced. "We're staying with you until you're clear of fighter range. Keep her steady." The collective determination of the crew reinforced their resolve. The German fighters, observing the dense formation and perhaps sensing their targets were low on fuel and ammunition, eventually pulled away, unwilling to engage further in the face of such stout resistance. It was a small victory, yet a crucial one, for the fighters believed they had claimed their share of victories that day. Among the chaos, Julius Meinberg, a wingman to Erich Paxia, survived the relentless attack despite suffering severe burns when defensive fire ignited his oxygen system. In his post-war memoir titled Fein Berührung, Contact with the Enemy, Meinberg would recount how he managed to survive and even claimed that he shot down a B-17 bomber during this engagement, an assertion that was ultimately half true. His account of the day's events remains a vivid testament to the chaotic bravery experienced in those moments. Flaming May, the damaged bomber, was lost that day. The aircraft was consumed by flames, and the crew, including Major Coulter and 6 others, perished in the inferno. Despite such losses and tragedy, the American Three, still fighting against impossible odds, refused to surrender. As the formation finally crossed into Allied-controlled airspace, the remaining bombers began to peel away, exchanging respectful wing waggles as they headed toward Biskra. Meanwhile, all American Three, having flown at a reduced speed to minimize stress on the fragile structure, pressed on alone, determined to reach safety. The journey from the target area to the Biskra airfield was supposed to take only an hour, but for the crew of this battered bomber, it dragged on for what felt like an eternity, 90 long minutes. Every turbulence, every sudden air pocket jolted the aircraft, causing the crew to tighten their grips and hold their breath, as if bracing against a relentless onslaught. The tail section of the aircraft, fractured yet stubborn, continued its unpredictable movements. Sometimes it aligned with the fuselage, only to swing at angles that defied logic. Flight officers Bragg and Engel developed a near-sacred rhythm, a delicate dance with an ailing aircraft that had already exceeded its limits. They moved in harmony, making small, precise adjustments, gentle pressure on the yoke, slow throttle changes, listening to the aircraft's subtle responses and responding instinctively. Operating more by feel and intuition than by precise instruments, they relied on their experience and touch. Their hands and feet sensed what the damaged aircraft could endure, guiding it through each perilous moment. The flight engineer, the crew of the All-American Three, was meticulously tending to their aircraft, methodically ensuring every engine was performing optimally. They noticed that number 3 engine was operating at a slightly elevated temperature, likely due to the effects of debris damage sustained earlier in the mission. Nevertheless, the temperature remained within acceptable safety margins, allowing the crew to proceed with confidence. Meanwhile, the oil pressures across all 4 engines remained stable, providing reassurance that mechanical systems continued to function reliably despite the ongoing stress and damage. Interestingly, their fuel consumption had shown a slight improvement. The decrease in speed seemed to have contributed to more efficient usage of fuel, an unexpected but welcome benefit during such tense moments. The Wright Cyclone radial engines, which had been carefully manufactured in various factories scattered across the United States by diligent workers whose names and faces remained unknown to the crew, persisted in their steady and unwavering roar, silent witnesses to America's industrial precision that continued to power the aircraft amid adversity. In the cockpit, Skipper Bragg turned to his navigator, Harry Newell, and in a calm, controlled voice asked, "Navigator, how far to base?" Harry had been tirelessly recalculating their position, constantly adjusting their trajectory based on the latest data. The damage inflicted on their aircraft had disturbed its aerodynamic balance, causing the plane to veer slightly sideways, a condition pilots refer to as flying in a crab. This sideways drift was an ongoing complication, impacting both their speed and fuel efficiency. Despite this, Newell's calculations indicated they would still reach the safety of the base, albeit with minimal fuel reserves remaining, roughly 40 minutes of flight time left before inevitable exhaustion. Meanwhile, Skipper Bragg was reassured by the favorable weather conditions. The skies over their home base were still clear, with no signs of approaching storms or cloud cover that could further complicate their landing. Throughout this tense period, the radio operator, Paul Galloway, maintained continuous contact with Biskra Tower, providing regular updates about the aircraft's condition. The base, aware of the urgent situation, had already mobilized its entire fleet of emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, and crash crews, lined up along the runway in preparation for a rapid response. The base commander himself had come into the operations tower, closely monitoring every detail of the developing emergency. The crew, displaying discipline born of rigorous training, proceeded with their landing preparations with mechanical precision, each member diligently checking, verifying, and re-verifying their equipment. They kept their parachutes securely fastened and ready in case rapid evacuation became necessary. Their minds focused on the worst-case scenario. If the tail section detached during landing, the crew could have mere seconds to abandon the aircraft before it became a fireball. Zook and Condard, responsible for waist gunners, carefully removed any loose equipment that might turn into deadly projectiles should a crash occur. Bombardier Burbridge, following long-standing protocol, secured the Bombay area, even though they were operating under extreme conditions that demanded utmost caution. Unbeknownst to the crew of the All-American III, their astonishing ability to remain airborne and maintain flight after such catastrophic damage was already sending shockwaves through the German fighter community in North Africa. Reports from German pilots who had eyewitnessed the collision and subsequent flight of the damaged bomber were swiftly filed. These accounts posed a perplexing challenge for intelligence analysts. The Luftwaffe had extensive experience flying against the B-7 Flying Fortress, a term the Germans used for the American heavy bombers, having engaged with them since the Allied entry into the European Air War. They believed they understood the bomber's capabilities and vulnerabilities well. According to their technical analyses, a B-7 could typically withstand approximately 20 hits from 20mm cannon shells before being rendered inoperable. Their design, featuring multiple redundant systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and a heavily armored structure, made it exceedingly difficult to bring down, even when hit multiple times. However, the sight of a B-17, flying with half its tail missing, yet still aloft and seemingly functional, defied their calculations. Initial reports from German pilots and ground observers were met with skepticism and disbelief. Naturally, they wondered if the aircraft had somehow crashed later, out of sight, perhaps after crossing the enemy lines. Could any bomber survive such catastrophic damage? It was hard to accept that any aircraft could remain airborne after losing so significant a portion of its tail structure. Yet the hard evidence was impossible to dismiss. Several pilots reported seeing the All-American III flying in formation with intact aircraft after the collision, an extraordinary observation that challenged the prevailing assumptions of aircraft survivability. Ground-based radar operators continued tracking its position long after it should have descended or been forced to crash, maintaining altitude and heading as if nothing catastrophic had occurred. This remarkable incident would soon be added to an increasing collection of reports that compelled the German Luftwaffe to revisit and reconsider their tactical approaches when engaging American heavy bombers. Their perceived invincibility, built upon years of experience with the formidable B-7 Flying Fortress, was being challenged in a once regarded as some of the most skilled fighter aces of their time and prominent figures in the development of Luftwaffe combat tactics. These seasoned pilots would later reflect on their encounters with the formidable American B-17 Flying Fortress. They observed with a mix of admiration and frustration how the bomber's exceptional durability and resilience under fire had a profound psychological impact on the German pilots. The sight of a flying fortress continuing to operate, even after suffering grievous injuries that would have utterly destroyed any other aircraft, was a powerful and disheartening reminder of the bomber's hardiness. It was deeply demoralizing for young, eager pilots who, despite pouring their ammunition into these heavily fortified targets, frequently saw their efforts thwarted as the Americans managed to fly home, intact and determined. The resilience of these bombers blunted the offensive effectiveness of German attacks, leaving an indelible mark on the fighters' morale and tactical outlook. In the tense moments following a heavy engagement, the radio crackled to life with a commanding tone from Biskra Tower. "This is the All-American, 5 minutes out, requesting a straight-in approach to runway 27. The response came swiftly and efficiently. "All-American, Biskra Tower. You're cleared for an immediate approach to runway 27. Emergency vehicles are standing by. How many wounded are aboard?" Pilots Bragg and Engel exchanged a fleeting glance, their expressions tinged with concern and disbelief. Deep down, they knew that by all visible signs and accounts, their aircraft, and everyone inside, should have been destroyed in the collision. Yet remarkably, all 10 men aboard, including Bragg and Engel, appeared unscathed, with not a single wound from the initial crash. It was an almost miraculous recovery. The tower radioed back, seeking confirmation. "All American, no wounded, just need a straight-in approach. Structural damage to the aircraft, but we're still flying." The commander's understatement was striking. In truth, the damage was catastrophic. From the cockpit, through the windscreen, the expansive brown plain of Biskra Airfield emerged from the desert haze. Home, safety, solid ground at last. It was, without question, the most beautiful sight any of them had ever seen, a symbol of hope after the chaos of combat. As they prepared for landing, Engel carefully moved the lever to extend the landing gear. The plane's wheels, operated by a separate hydraulic system from the control surfaces, responded with a reassuring metallic thunk as they locked into place. The indicator lights on the panel confirmed. 3 green signals indicated that the gear was down and securely locked in position. The next step was to extend the flaps. "Flaps?" Engel asked, his voice steady but strained. Bragg paused, weighing the options. Flaps would slow their descent, making the approach safer and more manageable. However, and this was crucial, they would alter the airflow over the tail section. With the aircraft's structural damage, this could increase the risk of weakening the already compromised fuselage, possibly causing catastrophic failure. Ultimately, Bragg made the call. "No flaps. We'll come in hot and use the entire runway to slow down." The approach, honed through hundreds of hours of meticulous flight training, demanded every ounce of Bragg's skill. The aircraft, heavily damaged and uncooperative by design, refused to fly straight. It yawed and rolled unpredictably, trying to pitch down as if eager to meet the ground prematurely. Each correction required an opposite counteraction, a delicate, continuous battle against aerodynamic forces that should have defeated them long before reaching the runway. As they approached within a mile, then half a mile, the runway widened before them, a much-needed beacon of salvation. This strip of land was their lifeline, and its stark outline against the desert horizon seemed impossibly inviting after the chaos of the flight. Ground crews lined the taxiways, their faces filled with a mixture of shock and awe as they watched the seemingly impossible spectacle of the American aircraft making its final descent. Some later claimed they could see daylight shining through the fuselage from a quarter-mile away, a testament to the extent of the damage sustained. The aircraft's main landing gear touched down on the sand-swept runway at a speed exceeding 110 miles per hour. While faster than normal for such a landing, Bragg's steady hands and careful planning ensured the touchdown was as gentle as possible under the circumstances. For a fleeting moment, it appeared as though the landing might be textbook perfect, with the plane settling smoothly on the runway. But physics, as relentless as ever, soon reasserted itself. Without the tailwheel, which had been destroyed earlier in the collision, the tail section no longer remained firmly on the ground. It dropped abruptly to the surface, threatening to cause a catastrophe. The aircraft, now a massive 65,000-pound sled, skidded along the runway with a cacophony of sparks and fragments of aluminum flying in all directions. A deafening roar of metal sighed deeply, recognizing the enormity of the task ahead. The battered aircraft, which they nicknamed All-American III, had sustained damage that, on the surface, seemed irreparable. Yet in this time of relentless wartime production and innovation, nothing was entirely impossible. At least that was the hope. The aircraft's fuselage was cracked and dented, the tail section hanging at an unnatural angle, held together by what appeared to be nothing more than fragile strips of aluminum that looked more like heavy paper than metal. For 90 minutes of flight, it had somehow held together through turbulence and stress that would have torn lesser machines apart, leaving everyone who looked upon its battered form pondering how it had survived at all. Meanwhile, the crew, composed of 10 brave men and women, after emerging from the wreckage, gathered in stunned silence on the runway, gazing back at their battered aircraft with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Nobody moved immediately. Shock held them rooted to the spot as they processed the bizarre sight of their once formidable bomber, now crippled but still somehow intact, defying expectations at every turn. The image of the tail hanging at an unnatural angle, almost disconnected, served as a silent testament to the fragility of what had been a mighty war machine. Soon, as if commanded by an unspoken signal, the entire crew, driven by a mixture of curiosity and concern, hurriedly made their way toward the aircraft's open exits and hurried over to the edge of the runway. Standing there, they looked back at their damaged aircraft with a sense of disbelief, recognizing the extent of its suffering and yet feeling a strange pride in its resilience. The damage was even more extensive than they had initially thought. The severity of the wounds was clear with each passing second. The tail, which had once been a sturdy and vital part of the airplane's structure, now sagged at an impossible angle. The connection that held it to the fuselage looked fragile, like strips of aluminum so thin they could have been mistaken for heavy paper. How this assembly had managed to stay together for those 90 minutes of fraught flight puzzled everyone beyond words, especially considering the violent conditions the aircraft had faced. Bragg, the crew's flight surgeon, approached, summoning enough calm and authority to address his fellow officers. He was quickly joined by his medical team, all of whom had rushed over in response to the accident. Addressing the crew, Bragg announced reassuringly, "No injuries, folks." His tone was confident but gentle, suggesting that everyone was unharmed, despite the chaos and destruction surrounding them. The flight surgeon's gaze flicked from the crew members to their battered aircraft and back again, a look of incredulous astonishment etched deeply on his face. His expression seemed to suggest either that he was witnessing an extraordinary miracle, an aircraft that defied all logic and physical law, or that he was experiencing a collective hallucination, a surreal scene that was difficult to believe. What happened next would become one of those legendary stories told and retold in military circles. A tale passed along in the countless ready rooms across the theater of war. Curious ground crew members from another squadron, drawn by the strange appearance of the aircraft and eager to understand its condition, climbed aboard All-American 3, intent on getting a closer look at the destruction's true extent. As they crawled inside the fuselage, they peered through the ragged gash that served as an opening, marveling at the widespread damage and imagining the stress it must have endured during flight. Their combined weight, probably no more than 500 pounds, proved to be the last straw. With a terrible grinding sound, as overstressed metal finally could no longer withstand the forces acting on it, the tail section of the aircraft separated completely from the main fuselage and collapsed onto the runway below. The 3 airmen on board scrambled away in a panic, their faces drained of color and bodies trembling, their sudden realization dawning that the crew of the aircraft had narrowly avoided catastrophe, perhaps death itself, during those harrowing 90 minutes of flight. Meanwhile, Master Sergeant Hank Highland, the crew chief responsible for All-American 3's maintenance and safety, moved slowly but systematically around the wreckage, taking meticulous notes. Clad in his uniform and clutching a clipboard, he studied the battered aircraft carefully, knowing that his task was to assess whether it could be repaired or if it were destined to be declared a total loss. Such a decision, in a different context, might seem straightforward. An aircraft that had suffered such destruction would normally be deemed beyond repair and scrapped. However, this was the year 1943, and the United States was engaged in an intense, relentless effort to produce warplanes at an astonishing rate. The factories in Seattle, Burbank, and Long Beach were churning out new bombers every few hours. Production lines operated around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffed by an eclectic mix of workers, men too old, or the men of the 50th Air Service Squadron, spent an entire 6 weeks engaged in what could only be described as an extensive and painstaking surgical operation. Their task was to integrate a tail section from a different aircraft, a B-17 that had been rendered completely useless after a disastrous landing accident, onto their own plane, All-American 3. This was no simple repair. Instead, it resembled the laborious and precise craftsmanship typical of a shipyard rather than a standard aircraft maintenance shop. Each step required extraordinary care. They meticulously fitted the salvage tail, ensuring every rivet was inserted flawlessly and every control cable was tensioned to optimal specifications. Electrical connections were tested repeatedly, with no room for error. These dedicated mechanics labored under the unforgiving desert sun, where temperatures could soar up to a blistering 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and then in the cold desert nights, plummet close to freezing, providing a brutal environment for physical labor. Despite the grueling conditions and the weariness that set in after so many weeks of relentless work, they persisted because each aircraft they repaired represented more than just metal and engine parts. It was a vital weapon in the ongoing struggle against their enemies. Every completed repair meant another bomber could take to the skies in the fight, inching closer to their collective goal of ending the war. The repair process was far from perfect, and by the standards of Boeing's manufacturing plants in the United States, the work was crude, rough even, with a certain unmistakable sense of improvisation. It was evident that the aircraft, after such repairs, would never quite regain its original form. She would be somewhat slower, less agile, and prone to vibrations that had not occurred before. Yet on the 10th of May in the year 1943, All-American 3 was once more airborne, carrying a new crew for a mission scheduled to strike at targets in Sicily. The ground crews observed her takeoff with a mixture of pride and concern. They had succeeded in bringing her back from the brink of destruction, restoring her to flying condition after injuries inflicted in combat. However, questions lingered. Would she hold up under the stresses of active duty? Or would her patched-together structure prove vulnerable? As the aircraft ascended into the sky, hope triumphed over doubt. She held together. All-American 3 continued her service, albeit in roles less demanding than her fighter days. She was relegated to transport flights, training missions, and routine supply runs to less hostile territories where enemy fighter opposition was minimal. After earning her stripes through relentless service, she had earned the right to a quieter, more modest existence. On the 6th of March 1945, at Lusaira Airfield in Italy, her wartime journey reached its conclusion. Decommissioned and salvaged, her battle history was finally over, and she was retired, a veteran of the skies whose life had touched the edge of history. Meanwhile, the story of the German pilot involved in the collision with All-American 3 began to unfold. Research into his identity revealed a young man whose own life had become intertwined with history's most violent moments in a way that few could imagine. Feldwebel Eric Paxia, at the age of 24 on the first day of February in 1943, just a year shy of Kendrick Bragg, became part of the larger narrative of aerial combat. Born on the 7th of May, 1918, Paxia had grown up in a Germany transformed by the rising tide of National Socialism, a country that was rapidly mobilizing toward war. In his youth, Paxia had trained in clandestine glider clubs that covertly prepared young pilots for what was then the secretive and highly advanced Luftwaffe. These training grounds operated illegally under the shadow of the Treaty of Versailles, which had sought to limit Germany's military capabilities following World War I, but had failed to prevent the rise of a militaristic atmosphere. By early 1943, Paxia had proven himself as an exceptionally skilled fighter pilot. His record boasted 16 confirmed aerial victories, placing him among the successful, yet not extraordinary aces of the Luftwaffe. Men like Paxia executed their missions with professionalism and precision, doing their duty without the widespread fame that often accompanied the most celebrated Allied aces. He served in the 6th Staffel of the Jagdgeschwader 49, known as Jagdgeschwader 53 Picas, one of the Luftwaffe's most effective fighter wings, which had accumulated an astonishing total of over 4,000 Allied aircraft destroyed during the course of the war. On the day of the collision with All-American 3, Paxia was flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G4, a highly refined evolution of Willie Messerschmitt's revolutionary fighter design. Powered by the formidable Daimler-Benz DB605 engine, which produced around 1,475 horsepower, the aircraft was armed with a 20-millimeter cannon firing through the propeller hub and two synchronized 13-millimeter machine guns in the nose, making it the condition of being unforgiving, whether in the chaos of war or in the delicate precision of aviation, leaves no room for mistakes or momentary lapses. Just a single instant of inattentiveness or a single bullet striking in the wrong place can render all prior experience meaningless in the face of unforgiving fate. Such was the reality encountered by those who risked their lives in the skies, where every moment counts and the margin for error is virtually non-existent. One such instance unfolded dramatically during a fierce aerial engagement. The swift, decisive burst from the twin 50-caliber machine guns operated by Technical Sergeant Joe James struck its target accurately, ending in the blink of an eye the life of Lieutenant Eric Paxia. His aircraft was torn apart in the chaos of combat, and his body was later recovered from the wreckage of his fighter. It was laid to rest in the Bourg Cedria German War Cemetery near Benarous in Tunisia, a solemn final resting place where Paxia's remains have remained ever since, entombed in Plot 3, Row 8, Grave 15. On the first day of March in the year 1943, in recognition of his bravery and sacrifice, Sergeant Paxia was posthumously awarded the coveted Ehrenpal der Luftwaffe, a distinguished honor goblet awarded for exceptional achievements by fighter pilots. The citation accompanying this honor was monosyllabic in its brevity, making no mention of the collision that had brought him down. Instead, it simply noted that he had lost his life in the line of duty, engaged in aerial combat against enemy bombers, a stark and concise tribute to his valor. His grieving family received the customary letter from his commanding officer, a formal expression of regret coupled with praise for his service and dedication to the Reich. Yet they could have had no inkling of the more extraordinary story behind his final moments, the one that would later come to be regarded as one of the most remarkable survival stories in the history of aviation. Few could grasp how, amid catastrophic damage, his aircraft survived long enough for survival to be possible, defying all expectations. The aircraft known as All-American III became a focal point for intense study among Boeing engineers and Army Air Force technical analysts. The core question was bewildering. How could an aircraft that had sustained such extensive structural damage remain airborne for a full 90 minutes? The answer resided in the pioneering design philosophy that underpinned the construction of the B-17 Flying Fortress. Unlike earlier bombers and aircraft that depended heavily upon a single main spar traversing the wing and fuselage to provide structural integrity, the B-17 employed a revolutionary semi-monocoque construction. In this design, no single component bore the entire load. Instead, the strength derived from the collaborative effort of multiple structural elements working harmoniously. The aircraft's aluminum skin, reinforced by internal frames and stringers, distributed stress across the airframe, allowing it to withstand severe damage. This distributed load-bearing capability meant that the loss of primary structural components did not necessarily spell the end for the aircraft. Under the right circumstances, secondary and even tertiary load paths could carry enough stress to hold the plane together temporarily. The critical factor in the survival of the All-American III was precisely what had not been destroyed: the intact status of key structural connections. Most notably, the junction where the wings attached to the fuselage remained undamaged, serving as the strongest point of the entire aircraft. The main wing spires, responsible for supporting the weight of 4 engines and the fuel tanks, were also unharmed. The bomb bay, designed with reinforced construction to carry upward of 8,000 pounds of ordnance, functioned as a rigid structural box. This robust section helped hold both the forward and aft portions of the aircraft together, even when other structural links had failed. William Allen, an experienced Boeing engineer, reviewed the incident reports and insights into the aircraft's durability. He emphasized that the B-17 was intentionally designed with combat damage in mind from its inception. In a detailed technical memorandum, Allen noted, "We understood that these aircraft would often take hits during missions. Therefore, we incorporated redundancy at every critical juncture." He pointed out the presence of multiple control cables, backup hydraulic systems, and structural members capable of carrying significant loads, even when their neighboring components had failed. Allen's analysis underscored how every extra pound of structural reinforcement was validated by the aircraft's survival in such extreme situations. The integrity of the electrical system played a vital role as well. While mechanical control cables could be cut or damaged, the aircraft's electrical wiring remained largely functional, especially the wires connected to the autopilot and servos. This redundancy allowed pilots like Bragg and Engel to retain some level of control via the Norden bombsight autopilot system, which proved crucial to the aircraft's ability to stay operational despite extensive structural damage. In essence, the combination of innovative engineering, resilient construction, and multiple redundancies created an aircraft capable of enduring damage that in any lesser craft would have led to catastrophic failure. The story of All-American 3 remains the resilience of what was essentially an aircraft, which had not been originally designed for such extreme endurance, turned out to be a priceless asset in the hands of extremists. Its very survival, after sustaining grievous damage, sent shockwaves throughout both Allied and Axis air forces alike. For American bomber crews, this event grew into a legendary tale, one that was recounted with pride and with a sense of invincibility in briefing rooms stretching from England across the Mediterranean to Italy. It became a symbol of hope and confidence, encouraging crews to believe that, even if their aircraft was severely damaged, if, for instance, she arrived with half her tail shot away, there was still a chance she could make it home safely. Such stories served to bolster morale significantly, fueling the fighters' determination during the grueling aerial campaigns. The psychological effect of this incident was difficult to quantify, yet profoundly powerful. It inspired the crews to operate with increased confidence, convinced that their bombers, often dubbed flying fortresses, could withstand punishment that would obliterate lesser aircraft. This newfound assurance even influenced squadron symbolism. The 414th Bombardment Squadron adopted a new emblem inspired directly by this extraordinary event. The emblem depicted a small puppy with paws folded in prayer atop the tail section of an aircraft, a visual pun rooted in the phrase, "coming in on a wing and a prayer." Curious as it may seem, although the popular song titled "On a Wing and a Prayer" was originally written about a different aircraft, the association with All-American 3, the specific B-17 involved, became an indelible part of squadron lore and tradition. For the Germans, watching this aircraft endure such punishment only intensified their concerns about the industrial capability of the United States. Field Marshal Gerhard Milch, who was in charge of Luftwaffe aircraft production, had already expressed his fears regarding the strategic implications of the burgeoning American bomber program. During a conference of fighter controllers, he remarked that the Americans were building bombers like we build cars, but quickly corrected himself, saying they were building them faster than Germans could produce automobiles. This analogy underscored just how rapidly and efficiently the Americans were manufacturing these formidable aircraft. Moreover, he highlighted that these warplanes, these flying tanks, were not fragile nor easily destroyed, fundamentally challenging the Luftwaffe's earlier tactical doctrines. Prior to this revelation, German strategic thinking was predicated on the assumption that catastrophic structural damage would inevitably be fatal to a bomber. German pilots were trained to target critical points, such as wing roots, cockpits, and bomb bays, with the expectation that precise hits by cannon shells or bombs would bring the aircraft down swiftly. Incidents like the fate of All-American 3, however, proved that this approach was flawed. Even when struck with what would appear to be perfect shots, the bomber often refused to go down. Major Garl, who would eventually become the third highest scoring ace in history with an impressive tally of 275 victories, described his own frustrations with attacking B-17s. He recounted how he, along with his comrades, would attack, score multiple hits, see large chunks of metal flying off, and yet the bomber would continue its mission without apparent harm. On other occasions, after firing all their ammunition, the attackers had to watch in disbelief as the aircraft, sometimes seemingly supernatural, persisted against all odds. This resilience prompted the Germans to develop new combat tactics tailored specifically to counter the durability of these aircraft. Instead of aiming solely at vital sections during attacks, they began attacking from the front, where the armor was comparatively weaker, and concentrated multiple fighters on a single bomber to overwhelm its defenses. They also designed and deployed heavier, more destructive weaponry, such as the formidable 30mm Mk-108 cannon, which fired explosive shells capable of punching meter-wide holes through bomber structures. This weapon was a direct consequence of Germany's realization that the B-17's robustness necessitated more aggressive and specialized countermeasures. The individuals who survived the extraordinary ordeal of flying All-American 3, especially the 9 crew members who experienced the impossible, their lives would be forever marked by this event. Each would process this traumatic experience in their own unique way, but all bore the undeniable imprint of having survived what many believed to be impossible. Their collective story, verified through meticulous documentation and eyewitness testimonies, stands as one of the most extensively recorded incidents in the history of aviation during World War II. Among those involved, Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg Jr. would complete his combat tour and return to the United States, where he would go on to serve as an instructor pilot, dedicating his skills to training a new generation of bomber crews and ensuring that the lessons learned from that extraordinary flight would not be forgotten. Heartened by the anticipation that one day, the skills learned and the courage displayed might come to save their own lives or those of others, the crew members dedicated themselves to mastering every aspect of their aircraft and mission. These moments of practice and preparation, often seen as routine, hold a deeper significance, for in the chaos of war, it is these very skills that can turn the tide and bring soldiers back home. Despite the chaos and danger, he rarely delved into recounting the specific details of February the 1st in the year 1943, choosing instead to speak only in broad, grateful terms. When pressed about that harrowing day, he would respond with a modest acknowledgement. "We were fortunate. It was thanks to a good airplane, a capable crew, and a stroke of luck." On October the 13th, in the year 1999, he passed away at the age of 81, taking with him the full weight of what it felt like to pilot an aircraft that, by all appearances, should not have been able to fly. Within days of the incident that marked that infamous day over Tunisia, navigator Harry C. Newsell penned a letter to his loved ones, offering what remains one of the most sincere and immediate accounts of what transpired. The letter, preserved along with the signatures of all 10 crew members, serves as a poignant snapshot of those moments before time, and retelling could embellish or distort the truth. "I still can't believe we made it," he confessed. The memory of looking back and seeing daylight streaming through the damaged aircraft made him feel certain they had reached their end. Yet somehow Bragg and Engel kept her aloft. The precise mechanism of their survival remains a mystery. No clear explanation, just a testament to the resilience and skill of those men. Ralph Burbridge, the crew's unofficial historian and a diligent observer, devoted decades to correcting many of the myths that grew around their story. His interviews near the end of his life painstakingly dismantled popular falsehoods. The notion that parachute cords held the aircraft together was dismissed, that they had finished their bomb run after the collision was false, as it occurred on their return trip, and they were not headed toward England but back to their base in Algeria. Burbridge grasped that the true story was extraordinary enough without any embellishment, and he passed away in early February of the year 2013 at the age of 92, leaving behind a legacy as one of the last remaining witnesses to that extraordinary day of combat. The stories of individual crew members are equally compelling. Co-pilot Godfrey Engel Jr., after surviving the war, returned to his home state of Connecticut, but rarely spoke of his military service, perhaps haunted by memories too profound or too painful. Those who knew him observed subtle tremors. His hands, during times of thunderstorms, would sometimes move as if he were still manipulating aircraft controls in the midst of battle. He lived a quiet life until he died at the age of 92, on the 3rd of May 2007, surrounded by his family who cherished his quiet strength and resilience. Among the crew, Technical Sergeant Jock faced an emotional torment rooted in the complexity of his role during that fateful event. His guns had shot down an attacking enemy fighter, a necessary action that undoubtedly saved his crew's lives. However, this same act had precipitated a collision that nearly resulted in the deaths of everyone on board. The paradox haunted him. He had done his duty, yet the outcome was tragic. The contradiction haunted my conscience, he would often admit. For the waist gunners Michael Zuck and Elton Condor, the most harrowing memory was witnessing Sam Cerilis crawling through the wreckage of their ruined aircraft. In his bravery, they saw something extraordinary. In an interview conducted in the year 1985, Zuck recounted, "We saw many brave men do brave things during the war, but watching Sergeant Cerilis, calm and focused, as he maneuvered through the chaos was something truly remarkable." The story of Staff Sergeant Sam T. Sarpelis, affectionately known as Lonesome Sam, became a legend in the Army Air Forces, especially because of his daring crawl through the torn fuselage, including the severed tail section. His composed demeanor and unwavering resolve embodied the very spirit of the American aircrew, an unflappable determination in the face of destruction. When asked what motivated him during that perilous crawl, he simply replied, "What else was I supposed to do?" That unwavering resolve, the ability to maintain composure when others might have given in, signified the best qualities of those brave men who fought in the skies. In the grand tapestry of memory, their stories serve to remind us that behind the statistics and reports were individuals of extraordinary courage, whose acts of heroism, resolve, and humanity continue to inspire. Was the B-17 Flying Fortress that truly captured the imagination of the American public and became a symbol of resilience and steadfastness in the face of relentless adversity. Its reputation was built not only on its formidable defensive armament and durability, but also on stories of crews surviving seemingly catastrophic damage, like that of the All-American 3. This particular aircraft, a symbol of perseverance, had become legendary after an extraordinary incident during a perilous flight over North Africa in the early days of February of the year 1943. As the aircraft was returning from a mission targeting vital Axis supply lines at Tunis and Bizerta, it encountered a brutal encounter with enemy fire that left it battered and broken, yet still airborne. The damage was so severe that one could hardly imagine it could sustain flight at all. The tail section, a critical part of the aircraft's structural integrity and aerodynamics, was completely missing, exposing the tail gunner's position to the elements and enemy fighters. The vertical stabilizer bore a massive diagonal gash, a wound that spoke volumes about the destructive power of the attack that had taken place just moments earlier. The fuselage from the tail gunner's station all the way forward was torn open and exposed, revealing the complex machinery and internal framework that held the aircraft together. Despite these grave injuries, astonishingly, the aircraft was still flying level across the desert, its 4 engines humming steadily as if nothing catastrophic had happened. This defied all expectations of physics and engineering, where such extensive damage should have resulted in complete structural failure, plunge into a nosedive, or disintegration mid-air. The resilience of this aircraft became an enigma that puzzled engineers, pilots, historians, and aviation enthusiasts alike for decades to come. The haunting image capturing this moment, taken by Lieutenant Charles Cliff Cutforth from Flying Flitgun, has become one of the most scrutinized photographs of the Second World War. It is officially cataloged in military archives as United States Air Force photograph number 55024, with the identifier F1234P015. The photograph vividly displays this battered aircraft in profile against the vast, arid North African desert, and the extent of her injuries are laid bare for all to see. In the image, one can clearly see that the left horizontal stabilizer is completely absent, leaving a gaping void where it once was. The vertical stabilizer bears a large diagonal gash, evidence of the ferocity of the attack that had nearly destroyed her. The fuselage, from just behind the tail gunner's station all the way forward to the cockpit, is torn open and exposed, revealing the chaos and destruction within. Yet despite all these devastating wounds, the aircraft manages to maintain a level flight path, with all 4 engines still running in unison. This image has often been misrepresented or misattributed over the years. Some have claimed it shows the aircraft being escorted by P-51 Mustangs over the English Channel, while others have suggested it was taken from a German fighter plane, attempting to portray it as a captured or crashed enemy aircraft. Some versions of the photograph have even been altered to exaggerate the damage, making the destruction appear more dramatic than what actually occurred. However, the original, authenticated photograph needs no embellishments or distortions. It captures a surreal moment in aviation history, a single image that defies the known laws of physics and engineering principles. It is a visual testimony to the remarkable skill, unwavering determination, and nearly miraculous circumstances that allowed this aircraft not only to survive such extensive damage, but to continue flying and fulfilling its mission. Many believe that divine intervention played a role, a sentiment shared by those who witnessed how 10 men operating the aircraft's remaining systems managed to keep her aloft against all odds. This extraordinary event took place at a critical juncture in the North African campaign, which was pivotal in the broader context of World War II. The German Afrika Korps, under the command of Erwin Rommel, had once appeared nearly invincible, pushing back Allied forces and threatening to solidify their gains. However, by early February of 1943, the tide was turning. The Allied forces, led by Field Marshal Montgomery's 8th Army, advancing from the east and American troops pushing from the west, gradually encircled and pressured Axis positions. The particular bombing mission on that day targeted key port facilities at Tunis and Bizerta, vital lifelines for the Axis supply chain. Each successful strike hastened the collapse of Axis resistance in North Africa, bringing the Axis forces closer to defeat. Within a span of just roughly 3 months following the miraculous return of the battered aircraft, the entire Axis position in North Africa was collapsing. The culmination of this relentless Allied push was the surrender of approximately 250,000 German and Italian soldiers at Tunis on May 13, 1943, a defeat that echoed the magnitude of Stalingrad in its impact on the German military's ability to wage war. In the aftermath of this pivotal victory, the aircraft that truly captured the collective imagination of the public during the wartime years was undoubtedly the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. Renowned for its incredible resilience and formidable firepower, this bomber earned a legendary reputation for its ability to withstand massive amounts of punishment while still chiefly ensuring the safe return of its crews. Over the course of the conflict, the B-17s played a pivotal role in America's strategic bombing campaign across Europe, dropping an astonishing total of over 640,036 tons of bombs onto enemy targets. This staggering figure was more than any other American aircraft involved in the war could lay claim to, highlighting the aircraft's vital contribution to the Allied efforts. Yet behind this impressive record lay a heavy toll, one that underscored the perilous nature of such missions. In the total production run of approximately 12,731 B-17s, a significant number, roughly 4,735, were lost in combat operations. Each of these tragedies meant the loss of 10 young men, aviators whose lives were tragically cut short and who, had circumstances been different, might have returned home safely. The daunting odds of survival for bomber crews during this brutal campaign placed their everyday chances of returning from a mission among the lowest across all branches of the military. Completing a 25-mission tour, which later was extended to 35, came to be regarded as an extraordinary achievement, an improbable victory against relentless enemy defenses and hazardous flying conditions. The story of the All-American III, a particular B-17 that remarkably survived severe battle damage, starkly contrasts with the grim statistical reality of strategic bombing. When engineers and aviation specialists analyzed this incident, they uncovered valuable insights into how the aircraft managed to stay airborne despite catastrophic damage. Their thorough examination revealed that the B-17 operated almost at the very limits of its controllability, with the aircraft's center of gravity having shifted drastically toward the tail because of structural failures. This shift threatened to send the aircraft into uncontrollable dives or spins, posing an immense challenge even for modern flight control systems. Yet its survival was largely attributable to the aircraft's inherent structural redundancy. Multiple load paths built into the design. The B-17's architecture incorporated layered redundancy for crucial structural forces. When the primary load-carrying members failed under the stress of battle or damage, secondary systems, though never intended to bear the full loads, managed to hold just enough to preserve a semblance of structural integrity. One critical technique that contributed to the aircraft's survivability was slowing down. As the crew, led by pilot Bragg, instinctively reduced speed, they minimized aerodynamic forces exerted on the compromised structure. Every decrease of 1 mile per hour in airspeed exponentially reduced the aerodynamic stress acting upon the damaged aircraft. Careful, controlled adjustments of the aircraft's orientation, undertaken with gentle and coordinated movements, proved essential, since aggressive control inputs would likely have exceeded what remaining structures could endure, risking further catastrophic failure. The efforts of Bragg and his co-pilot Engel in executing these delicate maneuvers, keeping their inputs gentle and precise, helped maintain forces within survivable limits. Additionally, the crew's strategic movement forward within the aircraft also played a significant role. By shifting their weight from the tail section toward the nose, they effectively shifted the center of gravity forward, partially offsetting the destabilizing tail damage. Environmental factors, too, contributed to the aircraft's resilience. The relatively smooth air over the North African desert meant there was no severe turbulence to stress the damaged structure further. Had the crew encountered a thunderstorm or turbulent weather, the aircraft's chances of survival would have diminished considerably. This incident continues to be a vital case study for engineers and flight specialists who explore how robust aircraft design and skilled piloting can combine to achieve what initially seemed impossible. The lessons gleaned from the survival of All-American 3 significantly influenced post-war aircraft development, especially in the areas of structural redundancy and the ability to withstand battle damage without losing airworthiness. From the German perspective, archival research into Luftwaffe records offers a contrasting view of the incident, detailing the loss from the enemy's point of view with precision. The War Diary of JG-53 recorded the incident involving Erich Patzia, noting that he failed to return from a combat mission against a formation of American bombers. Witness reports describe how his aircraft collided with an enemy fighter near the town of Mimberg, marking the loss of both aircraft and pilot. Yet what official German records tend not to capture fully is the psychological impact and morale effect that such incidents had on German fighter pilots. Many young German pilots, some with less than 100 hours of flying experience by the year 1943, faced the harsh reality of combat, an experience that, despite their training, often took an immense psychological toll alongside the physical dangers of aerial combat. In essence, the story of the B-17, and specifically instances like the surviving All-American 3, encapsulates not only the durability of innovative wartime engineering, but also the extraordinary skill and calm focus of. Throughout the course of the conflict, it was often said that American bombers presented an unusually easy target for enemy fighters and defenses. They were slow, seemingly vulnerable, and lacked sufficient armor. These assumptions influenced tactics and strategic planning, leading to the belief that a well-planned attack could cripple or even destroy these formidable aircraft with relative ease. Consequently, during engagements, adversaries would typically focus their efforts on these perceived soft targets, launching assaults with the expectation that they would absorb catastrophic damage, and yet surprisingly, continue to operate. Observers watched in awe as many of these so-called vulnerable aircraft, despite sustaining incredible assaults, continued flying, repairing, and delivering their payloads against all odds. Oberstleutnant Egan Meyer, a pioneering Luftwaffe tactician who devised the now-standard head-on attack doctrine targeting bomber formations, once remarked on this phenomenon. He observed that contrary to their initial expectations, the American bombers, specifically the formidable B-17 Flying Fortress, were not fragile at all. He noted that the aircraft resembled true flying fortresses, akin to structures in the sky designed to defend themselves. These aircraft could withstand extensive damage, to the point where even hits that should have been catastrophic failed to bring them down. Their resilience was so profound that German pilots began meticulously documenting the B-17's durability, analyzing how different attack angles and weak points could be exploited to maximize damage. Their research revealed a disturbing truth. Despite sustaining what appeared to be crippling damage, these bombers often managed to return to base. This resilience prompted the Germans to develop increasingly potent countermeasures. The Luftwaffe responded by equipping their fighters with heavier armament, improving their chances of damaging or destroying a bomber upon contact, culminating in the deployment of rockets and 30-millimeter cannons specifically designed to overcome the bomber's defensive strengths. At the Boeing manufacturing plant in Seattle, the consistent stories of all American Bomb Group 3's aircraft surviving countless enemy encounters were met with a steady sense of satisfaction and pride. The engineers and workers, who had poured countless hours into designing and constructing aircraft 41-24406, an aircraft that would become a symbol of American resilience, had never personally met the men who flew her. Yet, a deep sense of connection and shared purpose was felt by all. Each rivet driven into the airframe, every wire connected meticulously, and each system tested was a silent contribution toward ensuring that these 10 men, their crew, would ultimately make it home safely. The origins of the B-17's design date back to 1934, when the United States Army Air Corps issued a requirement for a multi-engine bomber capable of carrying heavy payloads over long distances. Boeing responded with a prototype known as the Model 299, which successfully flew for the first time on July 28, 1935. From the outset, the design philosophy emphasized resilience and survivability. Features such as multiple engines that could keep the aircraft flying even if one or two failed, redundant control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent fires, and armor protection around critical areas and crew compartments exemplified this approach. It was this comprehensive focus on durability that set the B-17 apart from earlier aircraft. The incident involving all American Bomb Group 3's aircraft, which exceeded even Boeing's most optimistic expectations, served as a decisive reinforcement of these design principles. The event became a pivotal example for subsequent engineering efforts, often incorporated into training materials for new engineers to emphasize the importance of redundancy and over-engineering. In essence, building aircraft stronger than what might be immediately necessary because someday someone's life would depend on that extra margin of safety. Even by modern standards, the production figures for the B-17 program remain staggering. At the height of production, Boeing, along with Douglas and Luke Vega, was completing an astonishing 16 aircraft every single day. The workforce was a unique and dedicated community, comprising thousands of women, widely known as Rosies, who had previously never worked in manufacturing, yet eagerly contributed their labor during the war effort. Their professionalism and skill resulted in aircraft of impeccable quality, producing standards that would be challenging to meet today, even with advanced computer-controlled machinery. Over the decades, the story of All-American 3 has become shrouded in myth and legend, with various retellings adding exaggerated or romanticized elements that never truly happened. Tales have grown more dramatic over the years. Stories of parachute cords holding the plane together amid battle, crew members completing their bombing runs after collisions, or heroic flights all the way across the Atlantic to England. Some accounts even describe the tail gunner being rescued mid-flight or surviving incredible peril. While these embellishments lend a sense of heroism and drama, they arguably diminish the true achievement embodied by the aircraft and her crew. The steadfast resilience of a machine built with extraordinary foresight and the bravery of those who flew her into the heart of danger. The stark reality of that day, confirmed through a combination of contemporary documents, crew testimonies, and photographic evidence, requires no embellishment to convey its astonishing nature. Incredibly, 10 men managed to pilot a heavily damaged aircraft, one that had sustained catastrophic damage, covering a distance of approximately 90 nautical miles, or about 165 kilometers, over a span of roughly 90 minutes, safely reaching their destination. This incredible feat was achieved not through luck alone, but through a combination of exceptional skill, unwavering determination, and seamless teamwork among the crew members. Remarkably, not a single life was lost during this perilous ordeal. The aircraft they flew was in such a compromised state that, under normal circumstances, it would have been deemed incapable of flight. Yet somehow it defied all expectations and refused to fall from the sky, persisting through seemingly insurmountable odds until it reached safety. Ralph Burbridge, the bombardier on board, who dedicated part of his later life to setting the historical record straight, recognized the extraordinary nature of the event. During his final interview, he emphasized that the true story was astonishing enough without any need for exaggeration. What transpired that day seemed almost impossible, a miracle even, but the crew accomplished it nonetheless. This is a story worth telling and retelling because it encapsulated the spirit of resilience and exceptional performance that characterized their squadron. Throughout the course of World War II, the 414th Bombardment Squadron participated in a total of 178 combat missions. During these operations, they suffered the loss of 85 aircraft and hundreds of aircrew members. Despite this, no single incident in their combat record quite matched the extraordinary improbability of what was later known as the All-American 3 event. It became a defining chapter in the squadron's history, a symbol of what they believed was possible against all odds. Recognizing the significance of this incident, the squadron adopted a new emblem that featured an image of a young puppy seemingly praying atop the tail section of an aircraft. This emblem was deliberately chosen as most of the squadron's young airmen, many in their early 20s, wanted a symbol that reflected their nascent experience and vulnerability. Rather than adopting a fearsome or martial emblem, they chose the image of a puppy in prayer, symbolizing hope, innocence, and perhaps the divine intervention that many of them earnestly believed had played a role in their survival. Decades after the war, veteran members of the 414 would gather at reunions, and inevitably the story of February 1st, 1943, would be recounted. Men who themselves had flown perilous missions, each bearing their scars and stories of survival, listened with deep respect as the legend of the bomber that refused to die was retold. This incident was also part of a broader learning curve for both the squadron and the German Luftwaffe. The encounter with the All-American 3 marked a pivotal moment in aerial combat, spurring a series of tactical and technical evolutions throughout the year 1943. At the outset of the war, the Germans had developed fighters primarily optimized for dogfights, airplanes that were nimble and equipped with machine guns suitable for engaging enemy fighters, but inadequate for tackling the evolving threats posed by heavy bombers. However, the sight of massive, heavily fortified bombers, such as the American 3, began to prompt the Luftwaffe to reconsider their approach. By mid-1943, partly in response to incidents like that of the damaged bomber, German fighter aircraft were retrofitted with an array of heavier armament. The Bf 109 G6, which appeared shortly after the Tunisia campaign, was armed with a formidable 30mm Mk-108 cannon capable of firing explosive shells that could create meter-wide holes in the structure of bombers, an impressive destructive leap in armament. Similarly, the Focke-Wulf FW-190 was modified to carry multiple 20mm cannons and even 2100mm rockets specifically designed to destroy Allied bombers. Major Walter Nautner, who would go on to become one of the Luftwaffe's most successful bomber interceptors, with an impressive tally of 258 confirmed victories, documented this ongoing evolution of German tactics and weaponry. Each passing month saw American bombers becoming more resilient and challenging to shoot down. In response, the Germans developed new tactics, improved their weapons, and outfitted fighters with better armor and longer-range escort capabilities. Despite these advancements, the German Luftwaffe recognized that they were engaged in a relentless and increasingly difficult race against the technological and tactical innovations of the Allied forces. It was a race in which they felt they were slowly falling behind, struggling to match the relentless pace of American advancements in aerial warfare. This ongoing psychological and technological struggle cast a long shadow over the Luftwaffe, underscoring the intense pressure they faced as they sought to adapt and counter the formidable Allied air strategies that were the significance of the pilots who flew the iconic B-17 Flying Fortress cannot be overstated. Many of these young aviation enthusiasts, often with limited and increasingly inadequate training as the relentless war dragged on, were instructed to carry out aggressive assaults against formidable bomber formations. These attacks, while tactically necessary, were fraught with peril. When they pressed their attack runs against formations, such as the formidable B-17s, they had to navigate into a deadly crossfire, streams of the highly lethal 50 caliber machine gun fire converging from multiple defending aircraft. making their task extremely dangerous and heavily reliant on both bravery and skill. As the war advanced into the year 1943, the odds of survival for German fighter pilots, who found themselves engaging with American bombers and fighters, sharply declined. The relentless industrial efforts of the Allied nations managed to turn the tide, but the heroism of individual pilots, such as those flying the legendary All-American B-17s, remained a crucial element of aerial combat. The endurance and robustness of the Boeing-built B-17 Flying Fortress served as a testament not only to the aircraft's innovative design, but also to a comprehensive and intricate industrial support network that underpinned its production. The creation of these airplanes was a feat of engineering and logistics that involved numerous specialized facilities across the United States. The powerful R-1820 Cyclone engines used in these bombers originated from factories located in New Jersey and Ohio, ensuring that each aircraft was equipped with reliable propulsion. The 50 caliber machine guns, vital for the bomber's defensive firepower, were manufactured in plants situated in Connecticut and Michigan. The extensive bodywork, characterized by the aircraft's distinctive aluminum skin, was rolled in manufacturing plants located in Tennessee and Washington. Meanwhile, the sophisticated instruments required for navigation, targeting, and communication were produced in dozens of highly specialized facilities scattered across the nation. This dispersed manufacturing network provided a strategic advantage. No single bombing raid or sabotage act could crippling halt the entire production of the B-17. It also allowed for rapid implementation of improvements and modifications, as lessons learned from combat experiences, such as damage repair or weapon upgrades, could be quickly integrated into ongoing production, often within just a few weeks. The scale of America's industrial mobilization during World War II is difficult for modern minds to fully grasp. In the year 1939, the United States Army Air Forces possessed a modest fleet of only approximately 1,700 aircraft in total. By the war's end in 1945, this number had skyrocketed to nearly 300,000 military aircraft, a testament to the staggering industrial effort undertaken. Specifically, the production of the B-17 Flying Fortress alone employed over 40,000 workers at Boeing's vast Seattle plant, where they worked tirelessly, operating around the clock on 3 shifts every day. Beyond its technological innovation and strategic importance, the story of the B-17, often affectionately called the Flying Fortress, is fundamentally a human story. It was about 10 young men confronting seemingly impossible odds, not seasoned soldiers, but ordinary citizens who had answered their country's call to arms. Among these young pilots were individuals like Bragg, who had been a college athlete, and NES, a dedicated engineering student. Then there was Burbridge, who, even before the attack on Pearl Harbor, had enlisted simply because he harbored a desire to fly and be part of the aerial fighting. Despite the terrifying circumstances, facing catastrophic damage or imminent destruction, their calm professionalism and unwavering composure during combat reflected the high standard of the training they had received. The United States Army Air Forces had established from scratch the largest aerial training program in history. By 1943, the various bases situated all over America were producing approximately 100,000 new pilots every year, along with equally large numbers of navigators, bombardiers, gunners, and other essential aircrew members. This extensive training program emphasized more than just technical skills. It fostered crew cohesion and preparedness for emergencies. Crews trained together through advanced exercises, learning to operate as cohesive units, understanding each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. This teamwork and camaraderie became vital in the tense moments of combat, often determining whether they would survive or perish. The crew of the All-American III, or as their aircraft was affectionately known, had flown together for many months, building a level of mutual trust that went beyond mere familiarity. Such bonds enabled them to operate with remarkable efficiency, even when their aircraft was literally falling apart around them. The survival of a single bomber might seem tactically insignificant amidst the massive scale of a conflict involving thousands of aircraft, but strategically, every aircraft, every crew, and every mission was vital. This particular aircraft had been involved in a critical bombing mission during a period when American daylight precision bombing doctrine was being rigorously tested in the skies over enemy territory. The core belief that heavily armed bombers with substantial defensive armament could penetrate deep into enemy lines, destroy vital targets, and return safely was under intense scrutiny. The resilience and determination of crews like those aboard the All-American. The perilous missions undertaken without fighter escort were increasingly proving to be alarmingly costly, both in terms of aircraft and crew casualties. However, incidents like the one involving the aircraft known as All-American 3 provided critical insights into the resilience of the B-17 Flying Fortress, revealing that even when subjected to severe damage, these bombers retained the capacity to make it back to their bases. This survivability was a game-changer, significantly increasing the likelihood that experienced crews would complete their entire tour of duty. As a result, valuable institutional knowledge and operational expertise could be preserved and built upon, enhancing the overall effectiveness of the bombing campaign. Furthermore, the fact that damaged aircraft could be repaired and returned to service rather than written off as total losses meant that resources were used more efficiently, and the combat fleet could be sustained over longer periods. More strategically, this new understanding had profound implications for German military calculations. If American bombers like the B-17 proved so challenging to destroy in combat, and if the American industrial capacity was capable of manufacturing these aircraft at a rate faster than the Germans could shoot them down, then the basic mathematical logic of aerial attrition increasingly favored the Allied forces. It was becoming evident that the Germans' efforts to diminish the American bomber fleet through relentless attack would likely be futile in the long run. This realization gradually prompted a shift in German wartime priorities, moving focus away from offensive weapons such as heavy bombers and instead emphasizing the development and deployment of defensive measures, primarily fighters, aiming to intercept and shoot down Allied aircraft before they could reach their targets. Despite this shift in strategy, which in theory should have hampered the Allied bombing campaign, it ultimately proved ineffective. Countless documents and detailed analyses have been produced, yet certain aspects of how All-American 3 managed to survive so structurally and aerodynamically against all odds remain subjects of ongoing engineering investigation. For instance, how did the aircraft's remaining structural elements, designed to bear perhaps only about 20% of the loads they normally carried, hold together for a full 90-minute flight despite such severe damage? And equally perplexing is why the aircraft did not succumb to aerodynamic flutter, the destructive vibration that can shake apart a compromised aircraft during flight. Engineers have studied the aircraft's behavior and concluded that it was operating within what is known as a nonlinear aerodynamic regime, a state where familiar aerodynamic principles cease to be predictable and stable. The fact that the airplane stayed controllable during this chaotic phase was likely due to an almost miraculous convergence of factors: the specific pattern of damage sustained, atmospheric conditions on that day, and the extraordinary skill of the pilots guiding it home. In this delicate balance, victory was achieved against extraordinary odds, a testament to both engineering quirks and human resilience. Fast forward to the year 1985, and a poignant reunion took place in Austin, Texas, where several surviving crew members of All-American 3 gathered to revisit memories that spanned more than 4 decades. Age had silvered their hair and slowed their steps, yet at the sight of the static display of the legendary aircraft, the years seemed to fall away in an instant. The men moved through the aircraft's interior, each one recalling their precise position during that pivotal day. Bragg, who was then around 67, found himself sitting once more in the pilot's seat, instinctively reaching for the controls as if transported back in time. Quietly, he remarked, "She was a good ship. She brought us home when she had every right to quit on us. You can't ask for more than that from an airplane." Meanwhile, Burbridge, standing at the bombardier's station in the nose, through the plexiglass windows, recalled the tense moment when he saw a German fighter approaching directly at their aircraft. "That's where I saw the fighter coming in," he said. "Right there, straight at us. I can still see his face sometimes just before James got him." The veterans shared autographs with aviation enthusiasts who had gathered to meet the heroes of All-American 3. They answered questions, posed for photographs, and exchanged memories. But within moments, silence would descend, silent recollections of that harrowing mission. Each man was transported back to that day in Tunisia, vividly feeling the shudder of the bomber from the impact of enemy fire, silently wondering if the next second would bring their final moments alive. In the broader context of the air war over Europe and North Africa, military historians have placed this incident within the larger narrative of Allied strategic bombing efforts. The story of All-American 3 is not isolated, but part of a persistent pattern that tested and ultimately questioned the effectiveness of German defensive strategies. It exemplifies the relentless determination of Allied crews and the evolving understanding of aircraft survivability, which shaped the tactics and priorities of the entire conflict. The incident embodies both the technological marvel of the B-17 and the human courage of the men who flew her, standing as a testament to the complex interplay between engineering resilience and battlefield tenacity. The story of the formidable American bomber known as the All-American 3 exemplifies both the remarkable resilience of mid-20th century military aircraft design and the extraordinary bravery of the young men who flew them into the crucible of war. This single aircraft and its crew serve as a powerful testament to the idea that survival in aerial combat often depended on a delicate interplay of three essential elements: innovative engineering, highly skilled pilots, and a fortunate alignment of circumstances, sometimes referred to as simple luck. This particular incident, which has since become legendary among aviation circles, didn't just highlight the resilience of one aircraft. It also significantly influenced the way military aviation design evolved in the subsequent years. Engineers and designers took the lessons learned from the combat experiences of the All-American 3 and embedded them into the very fabric of modern combat aircraft. The concept of redundancy, meaning the incorporation of multiple systems so that failure of one wouldn't spell catastrophe, became a core principle. Modern aircraft now feature several backup hydraulic systems, multiple sets of flight controls, and structural reinforcements designed specifically to prevent a localized hit from causing total engine failure or structural breakdown, precisely the kind of damage that could have downed a less resilient aircraft. The survival statistics of this aircraft and its crew continue to be awe-inspiring, vividly illustrating how close escape was in this particular encounter. From the moment the collision occurred, it took just about 90 minutes of intense flight before the aircraft managed to reach a safe landing. Over a stretch of approximately 150 miles flown after taking catastrophic damage, the aircraft managed to maintain flight at an altitude of around 20,000 feet at the moment of impact. Remarkably, out of the 10 crew members aboard, all survived without injuries, each man walking away from what should have been a disaster. The tail section, which appeared on the verge of detachment or destruction, was nonetheless held in place enough to allow for the engineers' repairs. Only 6 weeks later, after meticulous work, the aircraft was repaired and returned to active service, a feat that defied the expected outcome. A single photograph from that tense period captures what many would consider impossible, a picture that frozen in time, telling a story of survival and resilience that ought to have been beyond the realm of possibility. The aircraft's combat record before the collision, with an impressive tally of 16 aerial victories, speaks volumes about her prowess and the skill of her crew. The serial number associated with her at that time was 41-24406, a sequence that, had circumstances been different, might have been recorded as a loss and never seen again. Yet these numbers and the stories they encode serve as silent witnesses to a survival story that many would consider miraculous, an account that has been carefully documented and verified through countless reports, photographs, and first-hand testimonies. Presently, only a limited number of these historic bombers remain airworthy, a testament to the dedication of specialized organizations committed to preserving their legacy. These rare, precious aircraft are meticulously maintained, and when they make appearances at air shows, they draw crowds including aging veterans and aviation buffs alike. People gather to experience the thunderous roar of the iconic Wright Cyclone engines, which became synonymous with the Fortress, to remember and honor the sacrifice and resilience embodied by these flying giants. During these gatherings, the heroic story of the All-American 3 is often narrated by someone intimately familiar with its history, whether by a veteran who flew her, a crew member who served on her, or an avid historian who has dedicated years to studying her missions and repairs. For young people in the audience who naturally approach such tales with a healthy dose of skepticism, the story can seem exaggerated. Until they see photographs, read the crew's personal testimonies, and examine the detailed technical reports that underpin this saga. The skepticism swiftly morphs into awe as they realize that the aircraft she was, and what she represented, has long since vanished. Scrapped in the year 1945 after she had given her all in service, she is no longer a flying machine, but a symbol. Her story endures, preserved in the hallowed halls of museums, in the pages of history books, and in the memories of a dwindling cadre of World War II veterans who remember her with reverence and pride. She has transcended her physical form to become much more than just an aircraft. She has become a symbol, embodying American industrial ingenuity, demonstrating the extraordinary courage of her crew members, and illustrating the sometimes unfathomable nature of survival amidst the chaos of war. In an interview conducted shortly before his passing in the year 2013, Ralph Burbridge, a bombardier who had flown aboard her, was asked what message he hoped future generations would learn from the story of the All-American Three. After a thoughtful pause, he replied, "We were just doing our job." His words encapsulate the humble attitude of those who served, the understanding that they weren't hero figures but young men far from home, committed to completing the task given to them, regardless. The remarkable story of the crew who built that aircraft from the ground up, along with the diligent ground crews who tirelessly maintained and repaired her, exemplifies the essence of thorough craftsmanship and unwavering dedication. Each individual involved performed their duties with such competence and precision that when catastrophe struck, there remained a fighting chance, a chance born out of meticulous effort and collective resolve. This embodies the quintessential American spirit, everyone playing their part, no matter how small, toward a common goal. Sometimes during the darkest hours when hope seems to fade, it is precisely that sense of shared purpose that unites all efforts into a cohesive force capable of extraordinary outcomes. That unity allows even the most dire circumstances to be met with resilience and ingenuity. In a scenario where an aircraft was rendered incapable of flight, yet somehow managed to sustain the journey home, and where a plane designed for landing safely was brought down in an incapacitated state, the very fact that the crew survived and walked away from such devastation defies logical explanation. If one considers such an event not a miracle, then perhaps there are no miracles at all. The extraordinary saga of the aircraft dubbed All-American 3 extends far beyond a mere episode of combat. It symbolizes a moment when the seemingly impossible was achieved. It showcases a powerful convergence of engineering mastery, unwavering human determination, and sheer luck, culminating in an outcome that continues to challenge our understanding of aircraft endurance and resilience. The 10 brave men who managed to return home on that February 1st in the year 1943 carried with them not just the physical remnants of their battered bomber, with its tail nearly torn off, but also a legacy rooted in the formidable capabilities of American industry, the rigorous training of the Army Air Forces, and perhaps a touch of something beyond mere human effort. An intangible element that many might interpret as fate, divine intervention, or pure luck. Their survival served as proof that the B-17 Flying Fortress was rightly named, not due to external propaganda, but because of its demonstrated exceptional capacity to withstand the harshest of conditions and still fulfill its mission. For the German forces observing this event from afar, it was a stark revelation. They glimpsed not just the strength of American aircraft, but also the formidable power of American industrial might, expert training systems, and an unwavering determination to prevail. For the Luftwaffe and other enemies embroiled in the relentless attrition of war, All-American 3 became a symbol, a clear reminder that the numbers and the calculations of their losses would never fully tip the scales in their favor. The iconic image of that battered yet resolute aircraft, with its tail almost severed, captured in a photograph that endures to this day as one of the most powerful symbols of World War II, symbolizes more than just a single miraculous survival. Rather, it embodies the very spirit of the American air campaign: damaged yet undeterred, wounded yet still fighting, battered but unbroken, and ultimately returning home against all odds. Kendrick Bragg and his crew never set out that day to make history or to become symbols of resilience. Their mission was straightforward: to bomb a target and return to base, a routine task in the seemingly endless grind of war. Yet fate had other plans. When disaster struck, when an enemy fighter, succumbing to its last breaths, tore through their aircraft with a lethal edge, the crew responded with a level of professionalism that typified the virtues of the greatest generation. They did not panic, nor did they despair. Instead, they clung to their training, relied on the strength of their aircraft, and trusted in each other's resolve to do what needed to be done. Each member of the crew stood firmly at his station, fulfilling his responsibilities with calm certainty. Their shared trust in the aircraft's resilience, the precision of their training, and their collective courage in the face of chaos forged a story that would resonate far beyond their own lifetimes. An enduring testament to what can be achieved when excellent engineering is paired with human bravery. The Germans, witnessing that harrowing scene, the two aircraft locked in a violent embrace, the bomber seemingly merged with the fighter in a destructive symphony, were left in stunned disbelief. They had seen many miracles of war, but the sight of what appeared to be two aircraft becoming one, in a clash that should have obliterated them both, left them shaken. Even more astonishing was the fact that this battered bomber, against every law of physics and against all odds, managed to find its way back home. That incredible feat served as a stark warning and an undeniable proof of American industrial and military capability, abilities that would over time become the decisive force that overwhelmed the Third Reich's relentless war machine. Thus, on that February 1st day in 1943, the crew of All-American 3 proved that resilience, skill, and determination could transform even the bleakest situations into stories of extraordinary survival. Their journey, riddled with destruction, yet culminating in triumph, became a symbol of American ingenuity and perseverance. And enduring, there are 10 brave men whose lives should have ended in tragedy, yet through a remarkable chain of events, they survived in a situation that defied the very laws of physics and common sense. These 10 individuals were aboard an aircraft that, under normal circumstances, would not have been able to stay aloft at all, let alone make it back to safety. But somehow it did, against all odds. This aircraft was more than just a machine. It became a symbol of resilience and the unyielding spirit of those who served aboard her. It stood as a testament to the toughness of American bombers, which, despite their vulnerabilities and the relentless danger they faced, proved to be more resilient than anyone had initially believed. Additionally, it reflected the exceptional caliber of American aircrews, who, operating under extreme pressure, rose to every challenge with unwavering resolve. Sometimes in the darkest moments of warfare, when everything seems lost and the impossible seems insurmountable, extraordinary feats are achieved, defying expectations and rewriting the boundaries of what is deemed feasible. What makes this story so extraordinary is the tail section of the aircraft, which, after completing its perilous journey and finally touching down, broke apart and fell away. This debris, so fragile that it couldn't even support the weight of 3 inquisitive ground crew members, had somehow managed to stay attached and structurally sound throughout 90 minutes of flight, time during which it was subjected to the stresses and forces of aerial movement that should have shattered it instantly. The fact that it held together in midair remains one of aviation's most enduring mysteries, a compelling reminder that human ingenuity and determination can sometimes transcend even the most rigid physical laws. Today, when engineers scrutinize the details of this incredible incident, when historians compile the records for future generations, and when veterans recount their firsthand experiences, one truth becomes clear: this scenario should have been impossible. The physics, as understood by science and engineering, dictated that such an event could not occur. Yet the undeniable evidence, comprising photographs, eyewitness accounts, and official military documentation, confirms that the aircraft indeed managed to fly home safely when, by all reason, it should have crashed or disintegrated mid-flight. Within this seemingly impossible feat lies a profound message about the human condition and the extraordinary potential that resides within ordinary individuals. Faced with the threat of death and certain defeat in the hostile skies over enemy territory, these 10 young Americans refused to accept the confines of fate. Their unwavering refusal to surrender, their relentless determination to survive and to complete their mission despite insurmountable obstacles, forged a legend that would become an integral part of the history of the Second World War. This story endures as a shining example of how courage, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of survival can transform what appears to be an impossible scenario into an inspiring reality that resonates through generations. The impact of their feat was felt even by the adversaries, who were stunned witnesses to the extraordinary. The Germans, observing from afar, were taken aback when two enormous B-17 Flying Fortress aircraft were seen flying in tandem, one precariously dependent on the other, with one aircraft visibly damaged and critically wounded, yet both demonstrating an unwavering resolve to reach safety. The sight of American engineering prowess at its finest, of pilots and crew displaying exceptional skill and bravery, was nothing short of awe-inspiring. It was a vivid illustration of American tenacity and ingenuity, on full display in the face of adversity, that refused to accept defeat or surrender. In witnessing this incredible display of resilience and determination, they saw the very essence of what makes human spirits soar in the darkest times. The impossible made real through unwavering courage, technical mastery, and an unbreakable will. The Germans witnessed not just a flight of aircraft, but the triumph of the indomitable American spirit, proof that, even amid destruction and despair, the human ability to persevere can prevail against seemingly insurmountable odds. This story remains a powerful testament to that truth, forever etched into the annals of aerial warfare and heroism.